Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you for joining us for our June Dev Talk. So joining me today, we have Nicola Desault, one of our senior software engineers here at Zebra for our mobile computing business unit. So I just have a few housekeeping rules and a few introductory things to cover off before we dive straight into the presentation. So the first thing I wanted to do is just make you aware of the different ways that you can connect and be a part of our developer community. So obviously we have our Zebra developer portal at developer.zebra.com. This is designed as your one-stop shop for all of your developer needs and information. We have dedicated product pages and ways you can engage through our forums, as well as various blog posts monthly and promotion of our various events, including dev talks like these. You can, of course, follow us on our social platforms on LinkedIn and Twitter, as well as GitHub, all at Zebra Devs. And recently, we've just started releasing our Zebra Devcast podcast as well, which are available through all of the major platforms. So please do feel free to check that out. Also, just want to make you aware of some upcoming events that we have. So as we mentioned last month, we will be sponsoring both DroidCon Berlin and DroidCon London. So DroidCon Berlin in just a couple of weeks now. So if you happen to be in the area for either of those events, please do come and say hello. We'd love to have a little chat with you. We'll be having a booth at both of these events, as well as a technical talk very similar to the one you're hearing today. Most importantly, though, I wanted to make you aware of our in-person developer conference, which is coming on September 13th to the 15th, which we'll be hosting in Madrid in Spain. So some of you may be aware of the conferences that we used to run pre-COVID. We used to call them App Forum. We're back to doing that again, I'm very happy to say, and DevCon will be taking place this year. So we're going to have 50 technical sessions across all of our different business units. There really is content there for everyone, as well as some keynotes from our CTO and external partners like Google and DeepSense AI. So we have just opened registration for this event. We have some early bird discounts available for you. It's $149 until the end of July. So please make sure if you're interested that you take advantage of that. After July 30th, we'll be charging $250, which we still think is quite reasonable for the number of content that you're going to receive. So we've put the link to the registration site in the chat, which you should all be able to access, which contains a lot more information than I can cover off in a few minutes here. So please do check that out, and we would love to see you there. So just quickly, before I hand over to Nicola, there's just a final few housekeeping rules. All of these sessions are recorded. I always get questions after the event. They're always available on our YouTube DevTalk playlist. So just stick Zebra DevTalks into YouTube and you should be able to find them. And we also have Q&A open towards the end of the session for the last few minutes. So if you have any questions throughout, please use the questions tool on the GoToWebinar sidebar, and then we'll get round to those questions at the end of the webinar on a first come, first served basis. So that's enough from me. We'll hand the stage over to Nicola to take you through the content today. So the stage is yours. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James, and good day, everyone. So today's presentation is about what's new in Android 13 and the impact on Zebra developers. Let's see for a moment the agenda in detail. I'll start with a general introduction to Android 13, moving then to specific topics like the foreground services limitations that come with this latest edition, an update on the Zebra storage and tools to overcome these limitations. Then I'll talk about runtime permissions. I'll also cover the direct boot mode, the file browser app that's coming through our BSPs of Android 13, and I'll also quickly cover the XML support, the roadmap for the XML support for Zebra devices. And as James said, after the final recap, a Q&A session for a few minutes. My name, as James said, it's Nicola Desault. I'm a software engineer for the Zebra engineering department, and I'm focusing on the Zebra developer experience on mobile computers. So let's start with some general facts about Android 13. It was made publicly available last August, and the first Zebra devices receiving an Android 13 image, what we call the BSP, that happened in March this year as part of our Lifeguard program. Not all not all BSPs for all devices are coming at the same time. They are released in scheduled waves along the year. So check the website, the Zebra website, under the support and download menu to learn if your target device is getting Android 13. For sure, the platforms receiving the new Android versions are the SD660, the 6490, and the 6375. So these are the chipset of the platform at the core of the devices. While all the 6490s and the 6375 devices are getting Android 13, be mindful that only a select group of SD660 devices are getting this latest version. Today's presentation is focusing on the most relevant changes for the enterprise developer. So we'll cover what is really impacting line of business application that you are developing. I'll start with some Google messages from Google, who are general for any kind of application, then moving specifically to Zebra ones. Let me start with the end recommendations about Android 13. As happened for any Android version, there are a couple of behavioral changing lists that you might want to review. These lists are helping you to focus on the most impactful news of the latest OS version. The first checklist is about changes affecting all apps running on Android 13, which means it's affecting even apps targeting past versions, past API levels of Android. And I've pasted here on the right some items from this list. As you can see, these are affecting the performance and the battery, the privacy, the security, and the user experience. I'll delve into some of these topics today. And by the way, I've pasted here on the right-hand side of the slide a QR code, which is embedding the link that is in the left part of this item, and you see similar things throughout the presentation, so you can just frame the QR code with your phone and get access to the link from the recordings or live now. The second behavioral change list is affecting apps just targeting API level 33. As you can see, it's still about privacy, performance and battery, user experience, and even the Play Store. And since we skipped Android 12, probably it's worth for you taking a look at what happened even for API 31 and 32. Let's now move into some detail topic. The first one is the foreground services limitation. Android services have deeply changed over time. Here is what happened and how we are supporting you. In the past, Google introduced background services, but they have seen a growing misuse of these services because a lot of work was done behind the scenes, and this was leading to faster battery draining and in the end to a shorter phone life and the denial of basic services. So some restrictions were applied to background services and foreground services were introduced. The end users gained visibility on what was happening in the background through an icon in the notification bar. But over time, the notification bar got filled with icons, and so the initial purpose of notifying the users probably were losing momentum. So what's happening with Android 13? In order for you to post a notification on the notification panel, you need to ask a permission to the user. This is called a dangerous permission because it must be granted manually and at runtime. And it's not the only piece of news. A task manager to list and see and control all the foreground services has been added to the notification bar. And so users can see and stop a foreground service through the task manager. An important thing to be mindful of is that stopping a foreground service leads to terminating the whole app. And there are just a bunch of rules and ways that exempt some foreground services from being listed in the task manager, but line of business applications are not usually falling into this exempt list. And so the only way to prevent user from stopping a foreground service is now preventing them to pull down the status bar. And Zebra is offering a way to do this through the MX API in the user interface, the UI manager. There's a feature called the status bar disable. This feature is accessible through stage now, so at stage time, and also programmatically through the EMVK. This way you can prevent user from stopping foreground services. Another limitation on foreground services, starting from API 31 and over, is the fact that a foreground service cannot be started from the background anymore. In other words, only foreground activities can start a foreground service. And once started, keep in mind that, however, an activity can go away, leaving the foreground service running. There's an exemption list for this. And so the only way to start a foreground service from the background is really responding to one of the following events that you see listed here. The first two are if action delivered to application after the boot is completed, or if a PIN or password is set after the lock boot is completed. I've pasted over here a link to a piece of code, so if you prefer to really understand how this works, you can visit the code I've posted here. The other exemption is when an event of my package replaced occurs. If you're leveraging the first two actions, remember that your application in that case is running in direct boot mode, and you must mark your foreground service as direct boot aware too in order to run. You also have to start the foreground service immediately after you receive the notification. Otherwise, you get the not allowed, start not allowed exception. Data wedge is also affected by this limitation because the intent output delivery mechanism has always offered to start to deliver the information through a start service or start foreground services. These are no more effective, and you have to use either the start activity or the broadcast intent options. Now, an update on the Zebra storage. As many of you might be aware, Google tightened up its focus on security over the most recent Android desserts. A milestone was the scope storage introduction with the Android 10. And today also with Android 13, we have an operating system built with the user privacy in mind. In particular, there's a focus on public folders, those who are which are world readable and world writable, and are considered in the end to be a weak link in the chain of security, because if you're leveraging public folders, other apps can rename trusted files of your app, substitute files, and your app could clean up imperfectly on uninstalling. And these are all threats to folders that are used somehow, like the enterprise/USR or the data TMP public. So there's a growing pressure to leave public folders behind and move to even more secure wave of sharing data. You don't have to panic or be in haste. Everything is still in place with Android 13, but this is a warning to a suggestion to review your app storage strategy and adopt the new wave of sharing data instead of relying on public folders. One of the tools that we at Zebra are making available for you is the Secure Storage Manager. This tool allows you to fully overcome any storage-related concerns and help you to mitigate the scope storage restriction, and if you prefer to fully embrace the scope storage philosophy. It's designed for developers, for you, and I would like to just have a deep dive into the Secure Storage Manager. Let's see what the three words Secure Storage and Manager means. Secure, it's secure because the SSM is the acronym for this tool, enables a secure channel between an originating app and the target app. So the transmission, the channel is secured. It's also providing you with a feature of store and forward, because you can even ask SSM to store an information for an application, for a target application that not yet even installed, or not, or for an application that it's not yet ready to receive that specific data. See it as a deferred delivery mechanism. So SSM is storing information for you and in storing it in a secure way, as well as the transmission. So you have a point-to-point, you have the security on the transmission and on the storage side of things. This service is also a manager, meaning that it's a singleton in the operating system. It's unique. It's serving any third party and also system application, because also Zebra application are leveraging the Secure Storage Manager if needed, and it keeps tracks of all the multiple connections and the data shared to one or multiple target apps, and from that perspective, it's a managing tool. Assuming that you really want to move away from the raw file access, let me show you how you would approach a storage use case with and without Secure Storage Manager. On the left-hand side, a developer wants to share a file from an originating application to a target one. If the developer chooses to to write the code for everything to share this file, they need to write code for to manage the file of the content provider. And then find a way to notify the target application when the provider has some changes in store. And then the originating app needs to insert the information to be shared. This information is not encrypted by default if you manage these things by yourself. So if you want to encrypt the information, you need to have additional tool to do that. And finally, when the target application is notified that something has been shared for it, the target application can retrieve and consume that piece of information. In the end, this approach is not directly reusable by other apps. It's rather bespoke for that specific application, and all the implementation is managed by the developer. It's a lengthy process, leads to many more lines of code, and so it's prone to bugs and errors. Instead, on the right-hand side, if you decide to adopt the SSM, you see that your target app just need to listen to some standard SSM notification that are well documented on our DevTalk website. The originating app inserts the information to be shared into SSM, and once done, SSM is informing the target application that through a notification that new information is available, and the target app is able to retrieve and consume that piece of information. It's a shorter number of steps. It's easily scalable for all your apps, and more than that, once done for one application, you can keep a sort of copy-paste approach for any other application, because the code is always the same and is interfacing an object that is maintained by Zebra, and you don't have to care of anything else. And finally, and it's not trivial, you also get encryption as a bonus, because all, as I said before, all the transmission and storage of this information is encrypted. But how do you feed files into SSM? There are two options, at least. One is from the local storage, from internally from the internal storage of the device, or externally from a remote file server, even over the internet. Let's start talking about how do you share from the local storage. I've added a quick drawing to depict what's happening. The best option to do this sharing from a local storage is that the originating app declares and exposes a local file provider. It's pretty simple to do that, and this file provider should leverage the app's local sandbox, and any file that you say, for instance, a log file generated by the originating app can be written inside the app's sandbox, so it's protected from any other application running on the operating system. And when the app is sharing through the file provider, the app just needs to create a URI and put this into the SSM, and SSM will be able to retrieve the file through the URI and then share to the target application as decided by the originating app. A less secure option to share information is through the standard public folders, but be mindful of what I said earlier on this. So it's preferable to move away from public folders for several reasons. And in that case, you can still place the file to be shared on a public folder, and the SSM needs to have full read access for that. And the file, in that case, will be read by SSM. A copy of it will be stored inside its structures and then shared when target application will require it. There's also a chance to feed the file into SSM from a remote server. This is easily achieved at staging time through Stage Now, we have a feature type called deploy file to application. It's found inside the App Manager, and I'm showing this in the first slide, in the first picture in the right-hand side of this slide. You just need to input the target package name and the file name that you want to share, and tell the Stage Now the address where to pick the file. The picture on the right side here that I'm highlighting is a target application that has received a notification that a file is ready to be consumed, and the URI is, as long as you can see here, it's including all the Zebra Secure Storage Manager path plus the target package and the file name. And you can also get the single file name and some other information along with it. But how does the target application know that URI is ready and to consume a file? We can see this. In the case of a shared file, the receiving application is notified through a standard Android intent. The action of this intent can be read here. It's documented, of course. I've included this in a source file, and you can easily retrieve all the information that I've shown also in the previous slide. So the URI to consume the file, the file name, if this is a file or a directory, a security redundancy code, and if the file have been persisted or not, because SSM is also offering the persistence across enterprise resets. And if you decide to store a file persisting, it will survive an enterprise reset and will be ready after that event. Secure Storage Manager. The Secure Storage Manager is not only sharing files, it can share simple pieces of data, loose data, not in form of files, but of a maximum size of 10 kilobytes. It can manage a sort of key value pairs and guarantees that the keys are kept unique. And so if you try to insert twice the same key, you get an error. It works well in direct boot mode. We'll see later what it means. And the target apps are notified, in this case, of new data availability through the standard content observer on change callback. The originating app needs to call a notify change action in order to ensure that the target application is notified. I've included a piece of code of both the originating and the target apps here, and we can try also looking at these here. I think you can see here. So we start with inserting, for instance, some values in SSM, and when ready, after having done that, we call the get content resolve notify change. When doing this, the target application, a completely different app, must have registered a handler, and the onChange method will be called. And from this moment, you have access to the URI calling it, and all the data will be available. It's important to also see the documentation, and I've pasted here the proper DevTalk link where you can learn more about this. There's an interesting couple of use cases and features that you can combine using SSM. The first one is a tool that we call the DET. It's a tool to pre-encrypt data before feeding these data into SSM. With DET, an application owner can move sensitive data and content in general, or sensitive configuration to an application by means of an administrator, but keeping all the information private, so not sharing anything with the administration. The application owner, in that case, is sharing with the administrator just an encrypted piece of data that will be unreadable for anyone except the target application. This is a great feature because when data is encrypted through the DET tool, the target application consuming that information is getting it automatically unencrypted. And so no more work is needed on the target side. Another feature is the fact that an application needs to save some data for a future instance of itself. And as I said before, once you feed some data into SSM, that information is stored and the originating app can go away, can be removed. And if you persisted that application, that data into SSM, it will survive an enterprise reset. So even if you reset the device and reinstall that application, you'll be able to retrieve that information from SSM. And if you combine the options 1 and 2, you're covering an interesting use case, which is securely saving sensitive data for future use. So it's like you're using SSM as a safe. You put what you need to consume later, like passwords, keys, and you are sure that only you will be able to consume those sensitive data. That was the last thing about storage. Let's now delve into the runtime permissions, and let's see the state of the art at the beginning. In the past, the permissions were just manifest declared. Up to Android 5, when you needed some permission, you just declare it in the manifest. Starting with Android 6, the runtime permission were introduced. These were a way to make end users aware that the application were going to use some specific, probably dangerous permissions, and so they wanted the user to confirm that. We at Zebra mitigated that impact, introducing the Silent App feature, Silent App install feature for administrator, which is still in place today and works when you use Stage Now to install an application. In that case, all the permissions are granted automatically. More recently, the app hibernation state concept has been introduced. And if the user is not interacting with an app for a few months, in Android 11, the permissions were just reset. But from Android 12, not only the permission are reset, but also the jobs and alerts won't run, the application won't get any push notification, and the cache will be cleared. We are working to mitigate this with a feature that will be released in a future OS release in order to allow administrator to decide not to reset permissions after a few times. Until that facility is provided, our recommendation is proactively and periodically re-grant the permissions to the application that are not actively using by users. Another thing is to prevent users, of course, to access the app settings in order not to reset permission manually, of course, because any line of business application needs this permission to be in place. Otherwise, the users will be asked to grant them again. Another thought on permission is about a special subset of runtime permissions, which are listed in the picture on the right-hand side of this slide. For instance, the access notification, the package usage, the app ops, and the manage external storage, and so on. These special permissions are very powerful, and we decided to limit the auto-granting mechanism. So when you declare these permission, they are not auto-granted by StageNow at install time, but we provided administrator with the facility to grant these explicitly one by one, either through EMDK, so that's for developer, or through StageNow for administrator. Both can use the access manager. There's a feature called permission access action, where you select a specific one of these permission, and you decide to grant or to revoke the permission previously granted. Let's now move to the direct boot mode. What happened with Android 13? That Google removed the support for the full disk encryption and forced OEMs like Zebra to implement only file-based encryption file system. There's an impact on developers of this. Probably not all developers are maintaining or writing application that need to run after a reboot. But if that's your case, you better have a look at this that I'm presenting now, because only a portion of the file system and of the system resources are available after the boot and before the user unlocks the device. If this is your case, you can check if your file system is FBE or FDE type by reading the operating system property that is written here, the raw.crypto.type. And just to make you, for clarity, what was happening with the full disk encryption from Android 7 to 11, we have the choice to, of course, enable PIN or password to lock the screen, but at that moment also to enable or not the secure startup. With secure startup, the users were asked if they wanted to enable that with this prompt. If you enable the secure startup, no calls, messages, notification, or alarms will run or be received until the user unlocks the device. This was, of course, a scary situation for many administrators, because in an enterprise environment, you can't afford to have a device on and out of control. And so we provided also facility through StageNow in order to prevent users to respond to answer yes to this question in a way that preferably with full disk encryption we had the secure startup off. In that case, after the reboot and before the user unlocks the device, all the data were accessible and all the system resources. With Android 13, the full disk encryption goes away and only the file-based encryption is available. But with this, the direct boot comes. So not all the system file system and the resources are available. And so most of the developers that so far had application running after the boot should move from a situation where they had full data access to a situation where only a portion of it is available. In that case, they need to redesign the application in order to pick the right information during the boot time. And if you need to debug an application direct boot mode, be aware that there's a specific way to do that. In the developer options of Android, you have to install the application, select it as a debug app, and toggle on the wait for debugger. That way, when you reboot the device, the application starts, your developer environment, Android Studio specifically, through the attach process can see the application running, though the device it's still locked, but you can run and debug it while it's in direct boot mode. As said, you can see more of this from the developer Android documentation. I move quickly through the last two topics. The first one is the file browser app. Up to Android 11, we were able to use the Documents UI to create and change the open source version of files. So we were able to offer users a file browsing app that was also capable of showing and giving access to the Zebra folders. Unfortunately, starting from Android 12, Google disabled the use of Documents UI, and they made available the application called Files by Google, which is today available on our Android images. This is a closed source application, so we are no more able to add the access to the Zebra folders. We are working, we have plans to release a fully featured file browsing app during the coming months, but until we have this released, the only way to access Zebra folder and navigate this folder is through the settings of Android. Then inside the storage menu, choose the documents and other, and then open with files. This is shown in the three picture here in this slide. When you open this with files, you'll be able to see the Zebra folder right at the bottom of the list. And if you enter this folder, tap on it, you'll be able to see the two public folders, TMP, Data TMP Public, and Enterprise USR. Finally, the XML support on Zebra devices. We had planned to deprecate XML, the XML profile support in Android 11 and make it obsolete in Android 13, which means the plans were to completely scrap it by this Android version. But many developers and EMM vendors confirmed that they wanted to go on integrating with MX through XML profiles, and that the Android 13 timeline were too tight to meet the commitment. So we decided to temporarily postpone obsoleting the XML support in Android 13. That means that everything you have now, the legacy application, are still working on Android 13. These applications using XML-based EMDK in particular will still run. XML support will be available through the MX 11.9, and after that need to use the non-XML integration. This way we are adding new feature without losing the backward compatibility. We are targeting the end of this year for the release of the new EMDK supporting the non-XML based output for device configuration. There's a link on the tech docs that is here in the last row of the slide. If you're interested in this topic, please keep an eye there, because it will be updated with fresh news as soon as we have. I'm close to the end, and this is the recap. I have introduced Android 13. We have seen the foreground services and the limitation they now have in this Android version. We also had a look at the storage-related features and tools like SSM to overcome any restrictions, and we also had a look to how permission changed and how to deal with them. We then had a look at the XML profile roadmap and the files app for browsing file. With this, I thank you for your attention. The stage is back to James, and please let me know if you have questions.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It was a great session. It does look like we have quite a few questions that have come through. I'll put my camera on here as well. No problem. So first question here from Emmanuel. What about upgrading of SD660 devices from Android 11 to Android 13? So this came in towards the beginning of your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Great question. I have to say it's falling into the admin. It's a concern more for administrator than for developers. We are working on a procedure, on a facility to support the and prevent the data wiping when moving from 11 to 13, because as I said, all of our SD660 up to Android 11 were supporting the full disk encryption, and now they have to move to the file-based encryption. And if you don't apply a special procedure, all the data will be wiped out. We are working on this procedure, and it will be soon available for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question here from Matt, which comes with a bit of a preamble. So there is a warning to stop using public storage for external configuration files and to migrate to approaches such as SSM or managed config. There is also mention, however, that there are no further restrictions to public storage in Android 13 from what was introduced in Android 11. If nothing is changing in Android 13, is there a known restriction coming in Android 14 or 15?
No, not that we are aware, that I am aware. And seeing how the privacy is top of the mind of Google, I frankly would assume that it's better to move toward what we are suggesting. So the secure way of sharing data and configuration. In the end, public folders are still at the border of the secure storage of the scope storage, because the idea is that you have to share data in a secure way, and either you adopt all the concept by the secure storage manager and the scope storage, or you'll soon be probably out.
Okay, yep, I agree. Thank you, Nicola. Question here from Alberto. Is it possible to share the links with the participants directly? So I think you might have some QR codes on the slides to represent the links. Is that right?
I can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Question here from Ian in terms of timings. When will Android 13 be available for the TC52?
Oh, I have for the I don't have all the dates handy, but let me look up a document. Say again the number, please. The model.
It's TC52. It may be better in the interest of time if you can reach out to us, Ian, via email, and then we can get back to you
Yes.
after the event.
I can just confirm that TC52 TC52X is getting. Okay, we need to have, by the way, the exact model, because of course we have several versions of TC52X, AX, and then also the basic one and the healthcare version. So they all are getting under 13. I don't have the exact date.
Okay, no problem. So Ian, if you can email us at developer@zebra.com with that question,
yep,
we'll get back to you directly. So another question here from Matt. Will the post_notifications permission be added as a special runtime permission that can be granted via the access manager in MX?
Good question. I haven't seen so far, but I can ask to the team that is working on that. It's better if those who ask this reach out to us, and we can tell them exactly what the plans are with this permission.
Understood. Yeah. So Matt, the email address is developer@zebra.com if you'd want to get in touch with us directly. Another question actually from Matt here as well. Thanks for your engagement. So will there be any ability to report the encryption type, FDE versus FBE, of a device to an EMM like SOTI or AirWatch? There is a mention of using ADB to determine the encryption status, but that is not practical at scale.
Oh, sure. If this is, I mean, for Zebra devices, we know that exactly. However, if it's NSD 660 up to Android 11 is a full disk encryption. Android 13 will be FBE, of course. The other chipset were born with the file-based encryption from the beginning, in the end. But I'm not aware of procedure to get this on a massive scale. Frankly, you have to. No, I'm not aware of that.
So for Zebra devices, we can infer it based on the hardware of the device.
Yeah, otherwise the only way I was able to read that property programmatically. So if I'm not wrong, you can write an application and distribute it and write a log file or something like that, and retrieve for all your install base, which is the status of your file system.
Okay, good idea. So a question here from Hunter. Can Stage now use SSM to supply key value pairs of configuration information to my app, or only a file?
No, both. SSM offers two types of information storage. One is file-based, and the other is the key value pair. You can choose both, and depending, of course, on the context where a file is needed, or just a simple key or password, probably the key value pair is the best choice.
Perfect. So Stefan here is also asking about the A13 release date for the TC52. So Stefan, same answer to you. If you could email us at developer@zebra.com, and we'll get back to you directly.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you have a sales rep or a sales engineer that you are in touch with, probably they are aware of it.
Of course, perfect. This is a question for me, actually, I think from Ilyas. Is the upcoming DevCon, excuse me, is the upcoming DevCon a new name for the old app forum? Yes, it is. So we have just rebranded the name, but functionally things are pretty much the same event that you'd be used to, but obviously with up-to-date content. So yeah, great memory, and the answer is yes. So Elizabeth here asking, where can I access the recording? So the recording will be available on our YouTube DevTalk playlist. So if you just go on YouTube and you type in Zebra DevTalk playlist, you'll have access to all of our previous DevTalks as well as this DevTalk. It should go live within around a week or so. Okay, so another question here from Matt. It's quite a long question, so just bear with me a moment, but it does look like it's the last question that we have, and we've got a few more minutes. So if anyone is thinking about asking a question, now is the time, because we should be able to get around to it. So OEM config was originally a Zebra developed concept in partnership with Google, at least according to my understanding, which is correct. But it then became a standard that was expanded across the industry. Do you think it's possible for SSM to be something that could also be open sourced and then made available across manufacturers? As an app developer, it is difficult to commit to a new standard like SSM for file storage and access if it is proprietary and specific to Zebra devices only. So I suppose that's more of an opinion question.
Yeah, thanks for pointing this out. It's something that I'm working on this. In the end, I've already heard this from our developer base, and so it's nice to have a confirmation that there's an interest on this. I'll take this as a note that I'll bring on to my discussion and my conversation within the engineering. Thanks for pointing this out. It's something that I share, and I'd like to see realized in the end.
Okay, perfect. So that actually brings to an end all of the questions, just a couple of minutes early there. So I'm just trying to buy a bit of time just in case anyone is potentially putting a question together, but it doesn't seem like they are. So I think what we can do is bring the session to a close. If you do think of any questions after the event, I know that always happens to me. As I've said a couple of times now, feel free to reach out to us, developer@zebra.com, or of course you can engage with us through our forums on the developer portal, which is developer.zebra.com. So with that, we'll bring things to a close. I would like to thank Nicola once again for a great session and for your time today and your attendance at the DevTalk as well. We'll see you again next month. And yeah, any last words, Nicola?
No, I thank you and all our audience, and see you next time. Thanks again.
See you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.